I'm going to talk about fake news, specifically Arab countries. There was a news story which I addressed in another video. It said, women are now allowed to ride bicycles in parks in Saudi Arabia. And I said, this is a ridiculous story. It's absolute nonsense. I said, okay, where did this come from? So there was a newspaper in a southern city in Saudi Arabia that had a story that said a woman was riding her bike in the park, and a police officer said to her, "You can ride your bike in the park." And it was some sort of a news story. And it's in Arabic, it's not in English, so you can't really read the story. And American news media says, women now have the right to ride bicycles in parks in Saudi Arabia. That's not what happened. It was just some guy who said she could ride the bike in the park. There's no penal code. In Saudi Arabia, the law is Islamic law. There's no law that says you can or cannot ride a bike anywhere. No such law. There's no law saying a man can do this and a woman can't. No such law. It is all Islamic law. The Quran is the law, and the judge interprets what he sees solely based on his knowledge of the Quran. He can make a different decision for you as for another woman. It's the same situation. He can make different decisions in court. So then I said, okay, well, this was in a newspaper. I looked up the newspaper. The newspaper was in a small town. I looked up the circulation. It was 2% of the population of Saudi Arabia. But the Western media is saying that Saudi Arabia now permits it, but this only wasn't in all the newspapers in Saudi Arabia. It was in one newspaper that was circulated to 2% of the population. So it's fake news. And there was nothing about new permission or new law or new rights. It was just a police officer saying, yeah, you can do it. So it was fake news. And there was no indication whether or not men could ride their bike in the park. It was just not there. I remember being in New York City, going to Washington Square Park with my rollerblades on and my dog, and a police officer said, you cannot rollerblade in Washington Square Park because there's a sign right here that says no rollerblading. And I said, there is a skate park right behind the sign that says you can't skate. And there's people skating. Why aren't you telling them that they can't skate and point to the sign that says no skating? And I said, there is a dog park right behind the sign with dogs in it, and on the sign it says no dogs. So why are you saying that I should follow this sign and nobody else you're saying that to? And I said, look at that guy right there with his dog. He's breaking this sign, which wasn't a official sign of the city. You don't have to follow any sign. If it's not an official sign of the city, you don't have to follow it. It's just some sign that had some things painted on it. And if you've been to Washington Square Park, you might recognize the sign I'm talking about. The other people skating don't have to follow the sign. The other people with dogs don't have to follow the sign. And the guy said, too bad, follow the sign, and I left. Stupid laws. There was another one in Iran where the American news media said, I believe it was, women are prohibited from skiing in Iran unless they have a male guardian or something like that. And I was like, this is stupid. Who would make a law like this? So I researched this. So, okay, this is what really happened. What really happened is a woman got injured skiing, and the police told her, don't go skiing by yourself. Take somebody with you. And then they advised women, they said, don't go skiing by yourself, bring someone with you. And then the Western media said, this is now a law. It wasn't a law. It was just police advising women. And they said that they had to bring a male guardian with them. There was no such requirement. It wasn't a law, and they weren't required to do it. But that is fake news. And the feminist media is all over it, and they consider these victories one after the other, and they're all not true. I'm going to tell you another one. Fake news. This is not the Arab world, but it would be Muslim. I believe it was in Afghanistan. There was woman raped for being pregnant. No, woman imprisoned for being raped was the story. I said, this makes no sense. No one is imprisoned for being raped. So I read the story. The journalist was sexist. She interviewed the woman. She spent years interviewing this woman. She documented the story. There's photographs. Goes on and on and on. She tells all the story. She does this spin, which means she's not really telling the story. And guess what? She speaks to the man who was also in prison, gets one sentence out of him, which was, I didn't do it. And that's it. There was no long-term interview. There was no, oh, I believe you. She believes the woman, not the man. So the woman, I'll give you the background of exactly what happened. The woman had a sister who was married to the man. So the man was her brother-in-law. And the sister went out of town or was away for some reason. She had intercourse with her sister's husband. She got pregnant. That's the problem. Having the intercourse she would have gotten away with, getting pregnant is the problem, because when a woman gets pregnant, they say, who's the father? You're not married. Who's the father? You don't have a boyfriend. Who's the father? It's they expect you to have a husband. So she stated who the father was. It was the brother-in-law. She claimed that she didn't. At first, she didn't say anything. It wasn't until it was discovered that she got caught. She had to tell a story. So I don't remember the exact order of the story. I think at first she didn't say anything. She was charged with with adultery, which is imprisonable in Afghanistan or wherever it happened. So they both went to prison. She had the child. She gave birth. And the child was like 2 years old. And apparently someone had told her, well, guess what? If it's a rape, you can get out earlier. And she changed her story and said, okay, it was a rape. And the guy said, no, it wasn't a rape. It was consensual. No, he admitted that he did it, but he did not state that it was a rape. You know, he did admit that he did it. He said he's not guilty of anything. So she changed her story and said, okay, it was a rape. And the judge agreed to rehear her case. And the judge said, okay, I accept the fact that it was a rape, even though you did not report it when it happened, and it was after 3 years. It was 3 years later, and you were in jail. And the judge probably knew she was doing it to get out, and the judge wanted leniency on her. Did not give leniency on the brother-in-law. But guess what? She had another problem. Because when someone commits a crime, you have to report it to the police. If you don't report it to the police, you've committed a crime in Afghanistan that is punishable by imprisonment. So then the Western media picks up the story and says she's imprisoned for being raped. She was not imprisoned for being raped. She was imprisoned for cheating on her sister with her brother-in-law. She was imprisoned for adultery. The Western media lied about the story. The journalists spun the story to say that she was in prison for being raped. It wasn't true. It was all over. It was a huge story in the United States, and you probably remembered it. Okay, another one happened in Saudi Arabia. Woman punished for divorcing her husband. Sexism. No, you are 100% wrong. What happened was a woman wanted to divorce her husband in Saudi Arabia. She was granted the divorce. She had to pay her husband like an alimony. She had to pay him because she was divorcing him. And the American journalists and the American news said this woman is being discriminated against. She is being punished for divorcing. Of course, it's an abusive relationship, right? It's got to be that she was abused, even though there was no evidence presented in the story that she was abused, right? She's being punished. It's sexist. Why should she have to pay the man to be divorced? Well, guess what? in Saudi Arabia, there's two types of divorces. One initiated by the man, the other initiated by the woman. If the man initiates the divorce, he has to pay the woman. If the woman initiates the divorce, she has to pay the man. That's the law in Saudi Arabia. Every man, every woman that divorces in Saudi Arabia follows that law. It is not sexist. It is equal, and it was reported in the media as being sexist. That is the fake news. It was spread by feminists. People believe this. It's not true. You can research it, and you will find out, you will determine that that is in fact the truth. There's a lot of fake news coming out of these countries. It's embarrassing. So another one is women can't drive. I've addressed that. There's no such thing. It's not true. Women are more likely to own cars. They do drive in the South. They drive outside the cities. They don't like to drive in the city. I lived in New York City, and I lived in Long Island. Drove on the Long Island Expressway to work every day. Walked around New York City. On the Long Island Expressway, 9 out of 10 drivers were men. In New York City, the numbers are worse than that. It could be 99 out of 100 drivers are men. The city is dominated by male drivers. Women are not prohibited from driving in New York City, but they don't. They choose not to. The only time I ever saw women driving in New York City was during holidays. Halloween, 4th of July, whatever the holiday was, I would see women driving around because they'd be with their friends, large, like 4 women in a car driving somewhere, laughing, giggling. That's what I saw. False accusations. The entire thing about women driving, completely debunked. Watch my other video, and it goes through every detail about how it's never been true. No laws. The edicts are not laws, and every edict has an opposite edict that says they should drive cars. Women are more likely to own cars. They drive in equal numbers, etc., etc., etc. The police detaining women is fake news. A lot of it is fake news. They get detained for not having a driver's license and driving a car. Not for driving, but for not having a driver's license. And if you research the women that were detained, they're always being detained for not having a driver's license. Okay, so other issues about Arab countries. So there are restaurants that segregate men and women. There's what they call the family room and the men's room. So the men sit all by themselves, and the women sit with the children. If you go with your wife and kids, I don't know if the men get to sit with the family. I don't know. But the men, when they go to the restaurant, sit individually, and the women would sit with the children. And I was told by feminists, this is sexist against women. It's oppressive of women. That's just nonsense. The men are being isolated. Why is it oppression against women? Why isn't it oppression against men? Why not? Do you think that women don't want to be with children? Do you think that men are like demanding to be with the children of a woman that might not even be theirs? I don't know. It's not sexism. It's their culture. We don't know the reasons why they separate like that. We don't know. We know that they do have a cultural belief where people are separate. In India, they have the caste system, which is really, really racist and really, really bigoted, and they really, really believe this. If you are born of a certain caste, you wash toilets, you enter the building in a separate entrance, you can't marry outside of your caste or touch a person outside of your caste. They practice this. Nobody says anything about that because it's not a different race. It's their own race, and it's not gender-based. But it's bigotry. It's huge. It's one of the most bigoted things going on in the world right now, and nobody talks about it. I met a woman who told me that she went across Iran by herself. She went hitchhiking. And she said that the police pulled her over. She got arrested 4 times, she said. I said, why'd you get arrested 4 times? So, oh, the Iranian men love to arrest women. I said, why? He said, because they want to talk to me. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, I'd be hitchhiking. I was arrested 4 times while hitchhiking across Iran. The men would arrest me. They would try to detain me as long as possible, but they wanted to talk to me. They were Iranian men, and they wanted to talk to me. They weren't like saying, we're going to imprison you or you committed crimes. They wanted to socialize with her. They were arresting her because they wanted to socialize with a woman. So I may have told you on September 11th, I had a date with an Iranian woman in New York City, in Manhattan. And it was a blind date, and the person who arranged the date called me up and said, it's September 11th, it was a big disaster, do you still want to go on the date? I said, yes, I'll do it if she'll do it. And she agreed to do it, so we both went on the date. She opened up with a sexist joke. It was the first thing she did. She said, oh, I hope that someday we can tell dirty jokes to each other. She said something like that. And she's said that to the wrong person. When you say something like that to me, I'm like, nope, not interested. So she got off on the wrong foot. She was a nice person. She was intelligent. We had one of the best conversations of any woman that I had met. She told me some stories about living in Iran. She said that the men were sexist against her. She was a doctor in the hospitals or whatever. I said, why? She didn't really give me a good answer. Maybe she said, oh, well, we can't get ahead or something like that. Well, how do you know that? Only one person can get ahead. They don't promote everybody. Not everybody's a manager. And you're young. It's not like you're 50 years old. They're not going to give a management position to a young person. You're a young doctor. You're not experienced. I mean, she was like 30 years old. Like, what are you talking about? Get ahead. And she told me that she remembers when they were bombing the city and they had to evacuate the city and she had to watch them bombing the city. I had another good one. What was it? Okay, there was a woman, a journalist, who did a study in Iran where she went to universities. And I guess there was a male-only campus and a female-only campus. And there was either the same school or separate schools, I don't remember. And she interviewed the women and she interviewed the men. And she said that the men never smiled. They just walked around campus. They were boring and dull, never smiled, etc. And she thought that they were unhappy. She said, well, on the female campus, the women smiled, they laughed, they were happy, they loved talking to her. And she came to the conclusion that Iranian women are oppressed by men. And I said, happy people are oppressed and unhappy are not oppressed? Are you insane? That makes absolutely no sense. How can you say such a thing? What is the evidence of the oppression? My belief is that societies that oppress another group in their society fail, because societies do not succeed when you have a group that is in the process of being oppressed. It doesn't work that way. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. You may be different, but you aren't killed. Being different is not being oppressed. There's no such thing as a society that succeeds because a large group of people are being oppressed. And when women make up half the population, it's nonsense to say that they're being oppressed. It's just absolute nonsense. I know there's been many stories in Saudi Arabia over the years. Okay, so there's another one. A Kuwaiti princess was on Oprah. And Oprah says, tell us about women being oppressed in Kuwait. And the Kuwaiti princess said, you are crazy. We think American women are crazy. We think American feminists are crazy. They should mind their own business. They don't know what it's like to be a woman in an Arab country. She said, Arab women are treated like princesses. We are loved. We have free health care. We have all the money that we need. We are taken care of. Our fathers take care of us. The men take care of us. We are happy. We are happy with our families. We don't believe that we are oppressed. That is what she told Oprah. And Oprah at no point said, oh, okay, cool, I guess we were wrong. Never said that. She didn't say in the future, we're going to stop doing shows talking about oppression in Arab countries. Never happened. It's a narrative that is not true. It is not believed by Muslim women that they live under oppression. It is not something that they believe. I remember there was one woman who said that she was in a war zone and her house was like a castle surrounded by walls, and her father wouldn't let her leave. Now, obviously, come on, she had to have left at some point. It's not like she was constantly inside the house. She's obviously, at the time she was telling the story, she wasn't in the house. So at some point, her father had to leave her leave. But it was a war zone. I mean, would you say, hey, kids, why don't you go outside? There's a war going on. I mean, come on. That's just nonsense. Just absolute nonsense. They tell the story about the woman in Afghanistan who wanted to learn how to drive. I don't think I did. So after the fall of the Taliban, there was a news story about a woman learning to drive, and her husband was teaching her. The stupid foreign American journalist, who might have been a woman, was interviewing her and made some sort of a comment that triggered this woman, and said, the woman said, no, you're wrong. My husband does not tell me what to do. She said, I tell my husband what I want, and I told him I want to learn how to drive. And the husband just sat there, didn't say anything, and she's going on and insulting him right in on camera, and it's all being recorded, you know. And I read the translations, or maybe she even spoke English. And she's going on about, and she said, you know, their husband does not tell. She said, it's not the way it works here. It doesn't work that way. Okay, so there was a female journalist in the Syria-Iraq war. Guess what she's covering? Other women in the war. Because don't cover a man who suffers during the war, who are 95% of the casualties. Cover the women. So she was covering the fighters, the women who were fighting, and she was like, all the courage and the strength. She's going on and on about how courageous these female freedom fighters are. And they were. And, you know, this was in Kobani, I believe. There are some countries where women are in the military. I believe in Israel, it's mandatory for women to have military service. And maybe in places like Czechoslovakia or Serbia, it was also mandatory. But I think it was Kobani. It's hard to remember. In the Kurdish area, there were a lot of women that served in the military. And as I was watching all the things that she was saying, and all about how courageous these women are, my thoughts are, you as a female journalist are nothing to that woman. That woman is a real person. She loves her husband, and she loves her male children, and you don't. You can't interview a man because you're sexist, and you have a spin on your story, and foreigners are confused by this Western concept because there isn't this gender dystopia in all the foreign nations. It's in the Western nations, where there's a lot of women who have more influence than they claim to have. The male society is being dismantled. And I noticed it when I was a kid, and I said, it's not going to be good when I get older. In fact, I do not live in the United States anymore. I got out. Got news for you. I've met thousands of American men living in the Philippines, in Peru, in Colombia, in many cities, in other countries that I've visited, meet no American women. And they are all conservative Republicans. And if you go up to any of them and say, oh, are you here to meet a girl? They said, yeah, I found a girlfriend. I got a wife now, and she loves me. So, well, why don't you date an American woman? And listen to what they say. God, no. And we are loved here. I am treated like a human being when I live outside the United States. Women outside the United States treat me like a human being. When I was in the United States, first the woman, then the kids, then the dog, then the man. That's the way it goes. I was treated like dirt. So, was talking about the Middle East. Is there anything else that is relevant? Any other good stories? Okay, so I guess I'm going to leave it at that. If you have any questions or comments, please post below.